out of Peru more than 6 months, within a 12-month period, we lose our residency. So we can only come maximum 180 days. And if we're 180 days, if there's a plane that gets canceled, we're in trouble. So we can only come short time, so that kind of affects our getting everywhere all the time. So, and then COVID and different things have really kind of messed us up. I hope we're getting back on track now after this time around. But anyway, my wife is here, Melissa, and as Pastor said, my grandma's here as well. She always wants to come down when we come, so it's good to have her with us. You see a picture of our 3 daughters up there? They are all in Pensacola, and one going to college down there, Pensacola Christian College. They will be this fall. Our oldest daughter will be a senior. Our second daughter will be a junior. And our youngest daughter is an incoming freshman. So she just graduated from high school back in May. We left her there first about 3 weeks ago, or something like that. 4 weeks ago? I don't know. Now it's been too long. It's been too many miles between there and now. And but they're all working there for the summer, making money for college. And we are flying back to Peru in August. All will be staying here, so pray for us. This is a new adventure, new life almost, I guess. So my wife's like, what am I going to do now? I don't have any girls to teach. So, but she will fill up her time pretty quickly, I'm sure. So, we live in Cusco. I don't think we've been here since we've been to Cusco. Maybe we were on our way to Cusco last time we were here, and we've been in Cusco since June of 2018. Cusco is up in the mountains, in Andes Mountains, southern Peru. We live at 11,000 feet, and that's in the valley. So the mountains come up both sides of the valley, and easily there are we can see a peak from the valley on a clear day that's over 20,000 feet, covered in snow year round. We do not get snow though, because we're too close to the equator. We're only about 13 degrees south of the equator. So I was telling a few people before church, our yearly temperatures are 30 to 70 degrees year round. We don't get really hot because we're so high, but we don't get really cold because we're so close to the equator. So we moved to Cusco back in 2018 to help a church start a deaf ministry. And I have some pictures, and I'll show some things to you in a little bit, but I want to kind of give you some background. We moved in 2018. In June of 2018, began the ministry. The church is a national church with a national pastor. And they had a deaf couple as members of the church that were married in the church, saved, baptized members of the church, and one young lady that was trying to interpret for them what she knew. The deaf guy had taught her the sign language he knew. He is very low, I can't say uneducated, but has very little education. His sign language was very limited, and some of it wasn't right. And so it was, but she did what she could. And so then we started teaching sign language classes, starting looking for the deaf. And things begin to grow a little bit. Now, deaf ministry is slow at times, and especially where we're at. First of all, they're deaf, so they learn everything through their eyes. They have to see it to really understand it well most of the time. So when you talk about salvation, we don't see a person being saved. Now we see the effects of in their life, we see a changed life, but at the moment of salvation, we don't see anything. So for them to understand that, it takes a long time sometimes to grasp that concept. And another reason is because they are so poorly educated. In Peru, it is legally not possible to have a secondary, like a junior high or a high school education for handicapped children. It's not there. They have elementary education, that's it. And then their education is poor, and that is if they have the opportunity to go to school. We live in the mountains. A lot of deaf that come in from the surrounding mountain towns, they've very, very little education. One of our deaf guys has never been to school a day in his life. So his understanding of the spoken and written language of Spanish is very limited. easily, I would say 98% of the verses in the Bible, if a deaf person reads, and are deaf, if they read that verse, they will find something that they do not understand. So it just takes a while to help them understand. Because in the Spanish verbs, are kind of like, and Terry will understand, it's kind of like Greek verbs. The person, the action, and the time is all in one word. And it changes if I do it, or if you do it, or if he does it, or if we all do it, or if they do it. It's all different. And that's just in present tense. Then you have past tense, future tense, and there's 14 verb tenses in Spanish. And so those verbs, many of the verb tenses, they don't understand. Because sign language, like to go, this is to go. All this is the action, not the person and the time. Now, a lot of times in the context it's understood, but if it's not, sometimes it may take you 3 signs to say one word, just with the verbs. So dealing with that, it takes us a while to help these deaf grow and understand and learn. So our ministry began to grow. 2018, 2019, things were beginning to grow a little bit. We had people learning sign language, and we had a group of people who were interpreting and music, and then my daughter and I would do the messages, and we're going along, seemed to be moving along all right, and then 2020 hit, and COVID, and that pretty much almost killed our ministry in some aspects. March of 2020, Peru, when COVID hit, Peru had less than 1,500 ICU beds in the whole country. So they went to drastic measures trying to stop the spread of COVID, which did not work, but anyway, they tried. And one of those measures was on Sundays, you're not allowed to leave your home. No one, unless you were an essential worker, police, or you think it's hospital workers, no one else was allowed to leave their homes. So even to go to the church, we couldn't even do a live stream from the church. We had to do it from the home. And so the pastor's in his house, live streaming. We try to take it live from Facebook at our house, run it through the program, and add our video of sign language to it and ship it out live all at the same time. We did not have enough internet power to do that. So we had to, they would do the service, then we would take it once it was already on Facebook and run that through with our video of sign language, and then we could get it out, not doing 2 things at once. They're receiving and sending at the same time. So from March to November of 2020, we had to do that. We were going to bring our daughter back in April or May of 2020 so she'd get ready to go to school, and they also closed the borders. So we were not allowed to leave the country. We could have got a special permission through the government, U.S. government, to fly from Lima to Miami. We had to find a ride from Cusco to Lima somehow. And then that took you to Miami, and then you had to get another flight from Miami to wherever you were going. And just the Lima to Miami part was $2,000 a ticket. So we did not do that. So $10,000 just to get to Miami, and the rest of it, we weren't able to do that. So we came back when they opened the borders at the end of 2020. We came back in December of 2020. We were going to go back in June of 2021, and I lost my passport. And so we could not leave in June. I had to get a new passport, and it took a while in 2021 because they're still recovering from COVID, and the passport, the wages were way backed up, and so we finally made it back to Peru in August of 2021. So what happened was from March of 2020, when we couldn't have services and we couldn't have face-to-face contact with our deaf on a regular basis, from March to 2020 till August of 2021, we basically had no contact with our deaf. A little bit through phones and through video chats and that kind of stuff, but nothing really to have service to help them much. So we basically felt like we had to start over when we got back in August of 21. So we started over, basically, and now we're back to where we were before, I think. Our interpreters are doing better. They've had 5 and 6 years of practice. They still need to keep working on it, but they're getting better. We have 5 young people who interpret all the services on Sunday morning for us now. Thursday night we have a deaf service. It's all in sign language. There's no interpreting. And I am doing that all online right now. I record it here and then send it to them. Tomorrow night I'm in another church, so it'll be Friday night this week. But anyway, so that's the way we're doing things right now. So with that, let me introduce our daughters. The girl on the right, the farthest over, is Amanda, our oldest daughter. The girl on the left is Elena, our second daughter, and the one there between Amanda is Amanda, Elena, and then between Amanda and Melissa is Olivia, our youngest daughter. She is 18, Elena is 21, and Amanda is 22. Don't know how they made that, but that's where they are. Let's see. Is it this one? Let's see if I get this. It may be that it's not. Okay, he can go ahead and do it. That'll work. Put this out of the way. So we can go to the next picture. Just mention our sending church is Crossing Crown Baptist Church in Cantonment, Florida, just right outside of Pensacola, Florida. This is a group that came down for on a mission trip in 2019. They spent about 10 days with us there. Our pastor and then 9 other people from the church. Go on. So, when we got to Cusco, we had to figure out how we're going to meet the deaf. And I had some things done. I met some deaf ahead of time and different things, but we were there on our survey trips. But every Sunday, they would get together and play soccer. Work all week, come home for the weekend. I'll get home on Saturday, probably midday, because most of them work outside of town on construction sites or different things, and are gone all week because it's too far to go back and forth every day. And so they come home, and then they would do their laundry or whatever, and then on Sunday afternoons they get together. Because most of these deaf live in families that no one knows sign language. They're the only deaf person in the family, and their parents don't know sign language, their sisters, brothers don't know sign language. So they get together and play soccer. Well, we went to meet them. And every Sunday, there'd be 30 to 50 deaf. And I asked them, I said, hey, can I teach a Bible story? And they said, sure. So they would finish a game and once we got there, they would finish and then stop, and everybody would sit down, and they'd give me 5 to 10 minutes to tell them a lesson or a story or something. Usually one of my daughters was holding pictures, and I was over here in sign language explaining the picture. And they would listen for 5 to 10 minutes. By 10 minutes, they're ready to play soccer again. And so but they made everybody pay attention. I was kind of amazed at that. I mean, if someone was looking down or whatever, someone else had elbowed him, hey, look. They called it church, which wasn't necessarily a good thing because then they wouldn't come to church. But anyway, but we did get to meet many, many deaf. Since 2018, we have met well over 200 deaf there in the city of Cusco. But this is how we kind of got started, meeting several deaf. The next pictures, they all have deaf. There's deaf associations in every city, basically, the bigger cities. And every year for their anniversary, they have a soccer tournament. And they invite other deaf associations to come and participate in the women's tournament, the men's tournament. I saw something on Facebook the other day. They're doing volleyball as well in one of the associations this time around. But we've met deaf from all over. We handed tracts out to many of them. Even deaf have come from Bolivia. We're not too far from Bolivia. And so we've met all kinds of deaf, many deaf those in those type of activities as well. Then if you can go on. The girl on the left, her name is Yoni, and she's had a rough time since we've been in Peru, or in Cusco. In Cusco. By 2019, I think she's the oldest of 5 siblings. 4 of the 5 are deaf, which is not normal, but that's their situation. The youngest daughter was 15. Living at home, and they lived way out in the country in the mountains, some kind of grass wood home. I never got a full picture of how it was built. But early one morning, the parents were out in the fields working. Lightning hit the house, burned it down, and the 15-year-old girl did not get out. She died in a fire, and it hit the family pretty hard, which is understandable. The deaf all got together, helped pay for the funeral, and many of the deaf went out to where they were for the funeral, for the burial. The following Sunday, they were back where they played soccer, and the whole family was there thanking the deaf for helping. And I was able to pray with them and try to encourage them a little bit. So she would come with her boyfriend every once in a while to church. But then in 2022, they showed up, and and they began asking for help. They were having problems in their relationship, problems with, I believe, her family, I think maybe his family, and can you help us? So I took the boyfriend, Miguel, spent 6 weeks every Saturday for 6 weeks, an hour at a time, explaining salvation to him. And he has a sister who is saved, a deaf sister who is saved. And so he'd known a little bit, but it took him a while to fully understand. Finally, he understood and accepted Christ as his Savior. My wife was working with Yoni, and we had a deaf Bible conference in 2022. One night after the conference, I asked, does anybody want to be saved? She raised her hand. And so the picture on the right is her sitting in the back of the church getting saved, accepting Christ as her Savior in sign language. And so she does not come to church anymore because she just couldn't sit there and see her ex-boy. They're no longer together. See her boyfriend. So she's going to some other church. But we thank God we have an opportunity to work with her and see her saved. Now, she's still friendly to us. Talk to her, and she just hasn't been coming to church. The next picture is a young man by the name of Francesco. A year ago, a man that works at the Bible college where I teach some classes, was at a restaurant and saw a lady with Francesco and the mother, and they were talking in sign language. And so he walked up and said, "Is your son deaf?" She goes, "Yes." He goes, "I know a guy at a family that works with the deaf. Can I get your phone number?" So she gave him her phone number. He gave me the phone number. I called her, invited her to church, and she came with her the first Sunday. She came with Francesco. He was 22 years of age, never been to church a day in his life, didn't know a thing what was going on. When we're interpreting and singing in sign language, and anybody who knows sign language sings with us in sign language, or the deaf sing. Well, he didn't know he was supposed to do that. He just standing looking around and didn't even know really how to do it either, how to copy and sing, I don't think. And so the first time we had Lord's Supper, he had no clue what was going on. He was kind of embarrassed. And my wife had to explain to him, just sit there and watch, don't participate. But as the year went on last year, from about February, the kid was never missed. Unless he was out of town, his family was out of town, or his dad, who works out of town, had come in and had family activities. But he was always there. The first deaf person always to make it, just about every Sunday. And by the end of the year, by the first part of this year, he enjoys singing. He enjoyed coming. I tried to talk to him at different times and sit down times where I could talk to him, but he's going to an adult school, trying to finish his high school, and there's no interpreting. So he's in school from 8 in the morning till noon. Then he goes home and spends all afternoon and all evening trying to figure out his homework. And his aunt last year was helping him. I don't know if she's helping him again this year or not. But anyway, we came back in March of this year. 2 weeks later, the young man that one of our interpreters wrote and said that he had raised his hand in the invitation. And they had an invitation that week and raised his hand. I said, "Well, why?" He said, "I tried to catch him, but he had to leave. He always leaves right after church, his mom, to go see what his mom or whatever, where she works." And so later they got to talk to him, and he said that he'd been saved. He wanted to be baptized. I don't know if he understood fully yet. We need to sit down with him, and I need to let him explain to me what he thinks salvation is, what he did. But God is working in his heart. And if he's not truly saved yet, I believe he will be. But would you continue praying for Francesco? It's been neat seeing God work in his life, and as he continues to come. Go on to the next picture. These are just some of the other deaf that we've had come. Some of them no longer in Lima or in Cusco. Some are in Lima. Some are outside of a few hours outside of Cusco. They left because of COVID, but just some of the deaf that we've had. The next picture, some more of the deaf. The young couple there with the cake, they were there before we got there. They're the married couple that are members of the church. Last year we had a renewing of the vows for any couples that wanted to participate in the church. They were going to participate. They've been married 13 years. They wanted to participate, but his boss would not give him the time off. He asked and he asked a few times, and I said, "Can I go talk to him?" No, they'll get mad at me. So my wife made a little cake for each one of the couples, and so we gave them their cake the next day there. The guy in the blue sweater with the tie, that's Miguel. He's the one that came to know Christ as his Savior after 6 weeks of working with him. The next picture, I mentioned the deaf Bible conferences. We try to have one every year, and we try to bring a deaf man in to speak. The deaf relate to the deaf a whole lot better than they relate to us. And they really enjoy having a deaf person speaking. And so on the far left there, Frank is a young man from Lima. I taught him in the college we had there. He graduated with a 3-year Bible degree. He now has a deaf church in Lima. He's married. His wife's deaf. They have 3 little hearing girls. And he's come up in 2022, 2023, and preached our conference for us. And these are some of the deaf that were there in 2022. And the next picture is they were there in 2020, the next one, 2023, this last year. 3 of the young men in that picture are members of our church who are hearing, who are learning sign language. But the rest of them, apart from me, are all deaf. The guy in the purple shirt with the tie, he's deaf and blind. He takes his cell phone with a magnifying glass, and this is how he reads it. So if he's sitting where you guys are at, he can't see the sign language to understand it. So somebody has to interpret specifically for him, or even when you're talking to him one-on-one, you put your hands up, he puts his hands on top of your hands. And as you sign, his hands move with you, and he feels the signs in your hands. And that's how he knows what you're saying. And then he'll just talk normally. He'll take his hands off and sign, and then put them back on your hands. And it's interesting the first time you do that. Have somebody put their hands on top of your hands, and you're talking to them. And when you're doing it for a church service, and you do it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes straight, and he's pushing down on your hands, it gets tiring, and it can wear you out. He's from Lima. He came with Frank from Lima. We don't have any deaf, blind in our church, but if we do, we're prepared. I made all our interpreters talk to him. I don't know if we're fully prepared, but they've had the experience anyway of talking to a deaf, blind guy, putting their hands in his hands, and you know, it's pretty. Some of these girls that interpret for us are like, I don't know, but I made them do it so they get the experience. But anyway, so that's how he communicates, and maybe in the future we may have one. I don't know. The next picture. Then I mentioned we teach language classes because my wife and I can't do it ourselves. We just couldn't keep it. So we have developed for our ministry 5 levels of sign language from beginning, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, to all the way to the 5th level is interpreting a message. We have about 20 or 15 or so students, or maybe a little more, between level 1 and level 4, all in there right now. So my wife and I do a lot of teaching sign language. My wife, when we left, was doing 3 classes a week at least right now. And so, anyway, and so we can get other interpreters to interpret. Now, they're not all from our church either. There's some other churches and some other people that are taking sign language. We have 2 people that don't even go to church, but are learning sign language. And we're hoping we can work in their hearts so they can know Christ, come know Christ their Savior as well. The next picture shows a few things that we do. We've had them come to our house and play games, and so they can use their sign language. It's like any other language. If you don't use it, you don't learn it, or you lose it. The young man they're interpreting, this is one of the very first Sundays he was interpreting in church. And the camera's right there for the live stream. The deaf person's right here. And it's nerve-wracking, and you become very robotic, and you lose your expression. Because sign language is not just motions with your hands, it's expression. At least half of sign language is in your face, in your actions. And so, but he's gotten a lot better. And so we thank God for these guys. The next picture is some other opportunities that we have. Our primary ministry is the deaf, but we have other areas that we work as well. And so this is a group of pastors in Cusco and in the valley. Maybe you've heard of the Sacred Valley if you've studied anything about Machu Picchu and the Inca Indians. Cusco was the old Inca capital, right? Not too far away is a valley that they had for their Sacred Valley. There's towns all the way down the valley. So we have several churches we get together in fellowship. I have an opportunity to work with the pastors. This was a Christmas dinner last year with pastors and their families. And so work in their churches every once in a while, and different things like that. The next picture is the Bible college that I mentioned, where I teach a couple classes a year. In October and in November, I'll be teaching 2 block courses this year. And then some of the students that we had a year ago. The next picture is, I mentioned the renewing of the vows, we are responsible for my wife and I lead the the couples ministry in the church, deaf and hearing. So we do activities there. The other picture in the upper corner is in Lima, invited me back in 2023. I preached their deaf retreat, a 3-day retreat. We had about 74 deaf there for Thursday through Saturday. I have an opportunity to do that every once in a while as well. The next picture is camp. For the last 3 years, I've been the director of a kids camp from ages 6 to 12. And this last January, we had 98 kids at camp, all hearing kids. And it keeps us busy, but it's always a fun week. This year, there's a deaf couple that come to church some, and they had 2 kids who were hearing kids. They were camp age. And I've been wanting to get them to camp, and they were going to be, the last couple years they weren't in Cusco at camp time, but this year they were going to be in Cusco, and they don't have the money. They barely survive with that job C gets. And then we didn't have any funds, and so I asked our interpreters, what is there a way do you think we could raise funds to get these 2 kids to camp? They didn't come up with anything. And I thought about asking the church, but the church had been raising money for a construction project and different things, and I just didn't feel right. The Lord kind of said, no, don't ask the church. So I'm just praying about it. I didn't say anything else to anybody. And then a new pastor came into town, and they have 2 kids, and I wanted to get their kids to camp. So I was talking to them, and I could tell because of the move and all that, they didn't have money to send their 2 kids to camp. Another pastor they always signing their kids up for camp. Their boys weren't signed up, and so I knew that because of their situation, they didn't have the money to send their boy to camp as well. And so I was just praying, God, how do we get these kids to camp? And I talked to this pastor, and then about 30 minutes later, a young man from San Antonio, Texas wrote me. And all I had done was put in Facebook our flyer for camp. I said, pray for camp. That's all I said. And this young man, back in 2019, was in Peru. He got saved in Peru. He went to the youth camp that I preached, and so we've known each other since then, and he wrote me, and he says, Corey, I want to send 5 kids to camp. I didn't tell him I needed money for kids to camp. That was 5 days before camp started. And so I got to tell this deaf couple, hey, if your kids can come, I have money for them. And I told these 2 pastors, hey, I can pay for a kid to camp. And so they all got to camp. It was great. It was good to see them all there. The Sunday after camp, the little boy whose parents are deaf, he's 7 years old, he came up to me, Pastor Corey, when's the next camp? I am wiped out. A week from Monday afternoon till Saturday about noon with 98 kids will wear you out. And so I'm like, next year. He's like, he was ready to go back. So hopefully we'll be able to get him back next year. But it's always a joy to work with these kids. We're already, my wife and I are planning our activities and themes and stuff for next year. The next picture is just a little bit about the political unrest in Peru. I don't know if anybody saw anything in Bolivia today. The military, a group of the military tried to storm the presidential house and take him out of office today, apparently in Bolivia. We haven't reached that point in Peru, but can come close. They're all upset at the government. It's not against us. I mean, we live there. We don't feel in danger. I mean, we've walked right by where they're protesting. My wife doesn't do that too much, but I have, and they ignore me. We've been in Peru for 15 years, and not one time has anybody asked me what I do. As long as I pay my yearly fee, the government does not care. But the people do not like the government. At the end of 2022, the president Congress was against him. And he decided to shut down Congress and establish martial law until there could be new elections. He tried it. He thought he had the support of the military and the police, and he did not. They both, within 2 hours, the commander of the military and commander of the police, it's a national police force, there's only national police, they renounced him, and the Congress, because he didn't have the legal authority to do it, so Congress impeached him like that within hours. And he tried to escape to the Mexican embassy because he's friends with the Mexican president. And he got caught before he made it to the embassy, and he's been in jail ever since. He's not been to trial yet, but he's still in jail. Peru has had 6 presidents in the last 7 years. And impeachments, all kinds of stuff. And so the current president has less than 20% approval rating. The Congress has less than 10% approval rating. So, but when they impeached this president and the vice president took over, they got mad at her because they didn't, some of them, because she didn't support the president. So the people that voted them in went to the streets. And the next picture will kind of show you what they did. They blocked the roads. Trucks could not get in, bringing supplies, bringing fruits and vegetables. Truckloads of fruits and vegetables got dumped out because they sat on the road for days and couldn't get in. A propane bottle that was 40 sols went up to 180 sols. Or no, I'm sorry, 120 sols. Chicken was almost, and Peruvians eat chicken every day of their life, basically. And there was very little chicken for a month and a half. They did take over, get into 2 airports. They tried to get into the Cusco airport, but hundreds of police and military protected that airport. They didn't make it in. But has anything changed? No. But that's the way they try to get their voice out. So that happens every once in a while. And like I said, it doesn't affect us other than daily life. Sometimes ministry gets affected by it, but they're not. I've never felt in danger. So, and Peru has a fairly decent relationship with America, so we're not in danger that way. But anyway, the next picture, looking to the future. So our church, we're about to get to the point, we're hopefully getting to the point where they can run the deaf ministry without us being there all the time. The interpreters, they're there. What we need is, now they need to continue to improve, and we'll continue helping them do that. But we need somebody to take over the ministry. We don't have a man to take the ministry and run it full time yet. But if that happens, or maybe even before that happens, we would like to start traveling to different cities around Cusco, maintain our home in Cusco, live in Cusco, but travel to Espinar, Quillabamba, Sicuani, Abancay. Within a few hours of Cusco, we've met deaf in all these cities. And there's no one with a deaf ministry there. Maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses are there. But we would like to go to those areas and try to establish deaf ministries as the Lord leads. I'm hoping and praying that by next year we can start doing that. So that's kind of our future. And then the last picture, we used this acrostic when we were first raising support. Deaf everywhere are forgotten. In our world, in Peru, their education improved a little bit. Maybe their jobs opportunities improved a little bit, but there's still so few opportunities to tell them about Christ. So if you pray for us, pray for the deaf. They need our prayers. They need to know Christ. Christ loved the deaf person just as much as he loved you and I. He died on a cross for the deaf person like he died on a cross for you and I. And the deaf person has to be saved just like you and I. They can't say, oh, I'm deaf. God will accept me. It doesn't work that way. They still need to be saved. So would you pray for them? So if I went fast and you have any questions, if that's all right, we have opened up for some questions. If anybody has a question about anything. Yes, sir. So Cusco is a bigger city. We have around 600,000 people. These other towns that I mentioned, Abancay, I think, is 300,000. The other ones are smaller, maybe Espinar, maybe 100,000. Quillabamba might be a little bit more than 100,000. So there's quite a few people there. The deaf population, percentage of deaf people in third world countries is higher because of the lack of medicine. We ask these deaf people, were you born deaf? Many of them will say no. They got an ear infection. They live way out in this town, way out in the mountains, and there's no medical out there. And they lose a hearing, or they hit their head and fallen off ladders, and all kinds of reasons they've lost their hearing. But the medical affects it. So there's a good number of deaf there. Now you can get to smaller towns with a few hundred people, but the ones I mentioned, they're all around 100,000 or more probably. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Any, anywhere from 2 hours to 5 hours probably, the bigger cities. So that's one thing we may do in the future is buy a vehicle. In the city, it's a whole lot cheaper just to walk. We walk to church, we're not that far from church, or use public transportation. You can get from one end of town to the other end of town if you get the right bus for 30 cents. So, and if you can stand the people cramming in every once in a while, but anyway. But yeah, that's about where we're at in most of those towns. Yes, sir. Right, and so that's what we're trying to do. And number one, that reason, and number two, we have to have the help, or it's not going to get done. So. And we are training people from other churches in Cusco, because for the deaf sometimes to come to our church, it takes them 2 buses. Well, that's 60 cents. Well, for that deaf person, that's a lot of money. And then to go back home is another 2 souls, another 60 cents. And so then if they have a family, then it adds up pretty quickly. So if we have a ministry on the other side of town, then we're open to that as well, just to try to help them out. Yes, sir. So I think in my opinion, the most ideal way to do it is there's our churches in these towns. It's not like there's nothing. And find a church that's willing to work with us. Because we can't, we could move to Espinar and spend 5 years in Espinar, and all the other towns are not being reached. We started Cusco as a center, the bigger city, where everybody comes. So you need something established well there. Deaf come to Cusco all the time looking for work because there's more opportunities in the bigger city. And the tourism there provides opportunities as well. So if we can find a church that we can work with and go on a week or 2 week trips to help them little by little, that's our plan. We want to maintain our home in Cusco because if I go to Espinar, then Quillabamba's on the other side. It's like 8 hours, away. So Abancay's the other direction. So that's kind of I think the way to do it for us in our ministry. So now, if we could get somebody there that we could establish, they could run a deaf ministry, train them in that church, then that'd be great as well. So, but that's kind of our plan. And that will still allow us to help the church where we're at right now when they need help every once in a while, or do different things with them as well. So, but we needed to get this established first before we branched out. So we're getting there. Yes, sir. Yeah. So with our deaf, what would be a good word? Okay, so the word for forgive. So they may know the sign. They may not know the written word because they've never been taught the word written out in Spanish. So when they read the verse, they can't sign it. They can't read it. So deaf people, they have to learn by sight reading. They can't sound out the word. Spanish is, can sound out the words if you do the pronunciation right, but they can't do that. So, and then the idea, so for them to understand what the written word is. Now, me to forgive you, they can understand that because that happens in their life. But for God to forgive them and cleanse their heart of sin, that's a whole nother aspect, and so that you have to use illustrations, word drawings, using pictures, just to try to get that concept to them. There's a man that Ronnie Rice was a deaf evangelist here in the States. He passed away a few years ago. He did a whole video, and you can find it on YouTube, explaining salvation for non-verbal deaf. They don't even have sign language. So he's holding up the black heart. It's like you're teaching little kids, but they're adults. So you have to teach them at that level, but not treating them like they're 5 years old. So, but that's where many times where they are educationally and in spoken language. So you have to keep that in mindset. It is so easy to just talk over their head. It is very easy to. So that's why it takes a while. And forgiveness is just so like with Miguel. God forgives, and you use examples like your parents forgiving them and different things, and then you have to help them. One thing that deaf people have a hard time understanding is that they're sinners, that they've sinned, and what sin is. It's a concept that it takes them a while to understand. So, not all of them. It depends on a little bit about their family background, but a lot of them have had so little interaction with their parents who've never learned sign language. Those things, and it's normal for them to lie. It's normal for them to be dishonest or different things like that. So you have to explain all that to them and show them why it's wrong and that they have done that. And that's just one aspect. You can talk about anything about the Christian life. It's the same way. I usually spend a month, right? My theme for the month of June I'm doing on Thursday nights is say no to sin. I'm spending a whole month on say no to sin. Just to help them try to understand a little bit, to say no to sin. It's not that they can't. They can't understand. They can learn. It's just that they haven't had the education to help them. And then with the ability of not hearing it and having to see it, that makes it a little bit more difficult. Anyone else? Anything? Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So Peru is 85% Catholic. At one time it was closer to 95%. But they're Catholic in name only. Now Cusco is a little stronger. Cusco is, some of the mountain towns are stronger Catholics. In the city of Lima where we were, they may say they're Catholic, and if they show up for Easter and for Christmas, they've done well. They are a little stronger in the mountains. You do have Jehovah's Witnesses. You do have, there's Mormon churches and Mormon missionaries, but there's not a lot of Peruvian Mormons. So there may be, at one time there was 1,500 Mormon missionaries in Peru for their 2-year deal. But Catholicism is the biggest. Now, there's a town in Cusco that or outside of Cusco, that has along the mountain on both sides there in this valley, and on each side of the mountain valley in the mountains there's lights, 4 on each side, and there's a Catholic shrine up there, and they do their pilgrimage and march up there every year. But they are friendly to an extent. They'll listen to you. They'll be friendly to you. We don't have any problems with that. So now to help them to get rid of their Catholic traditions, that's a whole other issue. But they are friendly people. Yes, sir. No, that's fine. So I've given my testimony here a long time ago, but I grew up here in Wyoming. I was saved in this church years ago. So some of you knew that, some of you didn't. But my dad he's a pastor in Douglas. When I was 13, we went to the Bill Rice Ranch at a youth camp in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. My dad was the head cowboy. They do trail rides, horses. And they had deaf camps. I grew up out here. There's no one. I live in a city that has more people than the whole state right now, right? So I don't ever remember seeing a deaf person before that. I may have, but I don't remember it. I knew 2 things about deaf people. They couldn't hear, and they talk with their hands. First week of deaf camp, there's 900 deaf people. I'll never forget it. Never forget it. Watch 900 deaf people eat and talk all at the same time. And you think, how in the world can they do this? It's all with their hands. Go to a deaf chapel service with 900 deaf people. It's not quiet, and they don't know how loud they are. So sometimes, it's when they try to sing and all those kind of things. But we were told that most of those deaf kids' parents didn't know sign language. And now it's improved a lot in the States since then. But we moved back to Wyoming at the end of the summer. We moved to Douglas. God wouldn't let me forget their parents don't know sign language. For 8 months, I was 13, 14, God was working in my heart. Corey, their parents don't know sign language. So finally I said, yes, Lord, I'll work with the deaf when a missionary came to our church. And but then in college, I learned sign language, the American Sign Language. I had classes there on Sunday afternoons when I was in college. Went to Peru, and in Peru we learned the Peruvian version of sign language. So that's kind of how all that. That's a really quick summary of how that happened. We learned, so our first year in Peru, we took Spanish classes and learned sign language by talking to the people, the differences. So now my Peruvian sign language is 50 times better than my American sign language because I never use American sign language. So. Yes, ma'am. They were 60% the same 15 years ago, but as languages evolve, they're going this way. Peruvians do not want to say they have American Sign Language. So what happened was, in the 1960s, American deaf man went to Peru as a missionary to start a deaf church. He got there was no sign language, none. So he took what he had, his American Sign Language, adapted it to Peruvian culture and to Spanish, and that's where Peruvian Sign Language got its start. But now, ASL, American Sign Language, is going this way. We get back, and our daughter, who's been interpreting the Pensacola, is like, that's not the sign. What? So we've had to learn a few new signs, and Peruvian Sign Language is going the other way. So, but there's still 50% or more the same. In the future, it may get farther apart. I don't know. So, but if you know American Sign Language, you can go down there. You can get by for the time being. For a while, you'll be able to get by. All right. Well, thank you for your time. It's 8 o'clock, and I hope this helped. We have a display table there. You can grab a prayer card. It's almost exactly like the other one, but has a new picture. And so our daughter said, can we get a new picture? She was 12 or so, whatever, in the last one. So anyway, and there's a picture there of a Peruvian cuisine. He's about that long if you're trying to figure out what he is. And if not, we'll let you know. Anyway, thank you.